Hi, my name's Daniel, and 5 days ago, I found out I was never part of the family, just a placeholder. They said it was just business, but it wasn't HR who gave the ultimatum. It was my father-in-law. Resign, or we'll fire you. After 21 years of loyalty, so his son, my brother-in-law, could take my place. I typed one sentence, just one. And 5 days later, their lawyer called, shaking. What exactly did you mean by effective upon full settlement? That's when they realized they didn't bury me. They triggered something they weren't ready for. But what hurts more than betrayal in business is betrayal in blood. So tell me, how do you fight back? When it's your own family holding the knife, stay with me. This story doesn't end how they planned. Hand in your resignation, or we'll fire you. That sentence didn't come from some faceless executive or an outside consultant with no clue about what I've built over the last 2 decades. It came from my father-in-law, Richard, sitting across from me, polished and calm, like he was offering a cup of coffee instead of pulling the rug from under my feet. No raised voice, no tension in his brow, just cold authority. That somehow made it worse. I sat still, watching his mouth form the words I never imagined I'd hear, and listening to the echo of my heartbeat bounce off the walnut-paneled walls. 21 years. I gave this family everything, my loyalty, my energy, my silence when silence wasn't easy. I worked the late nights while others vacationed. I watched his kids grow up, watched his son stumble, fail, get bailed out, and still be treated like the heir to a kingdom I helped build. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I just stared at him, at the legal pad in front of me, already filled out except for my signature. The conference room was spotless, not a pen out of place, bottles of water lined up perfectly. A few yellow folders rested in the center of the table, my name typed on the tab. They'd been prepared in advance. This wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't even recent. They'd planned this. I glanced at the seat to Richard's right, his son, Jonathan, younger by a decade, no business background. A string of half-baked ventures funded by family money, all of them circling the drain. But here he was, in a pressed suit, looking like he actually belonged at the table. He didn't meet my eyes. I realized then, this wasn't about my work. This wasn't about performance or results or a mistake I didn't know I'd made. It was about blood, about handing the reins to someone who shared a last name instead of someone who actually earned the right. Richard folded his hands. You can walk out with your dignity intact, or you can make this hard, for everyone. I didn't respond. I'd been keeping the peace for years, taking the smaller slice of credit, letting the little jabs pass. You're not really one of us, but you're close enough, his wife once said at a family barbecue, laughing over a glass of wine. I laughed too, but I felt it then, and I felt it now. I was useful, not permanent. And Jonathan? He was a disappointment they never stopped believing in. I looked around the room, waiting, hoping for someone else to step in. Maybe Harold from finance, who'd once told me I was the steady hand in the chaos. Or even Susan, Richard's sister, who leaned on me every time their accounting system threatened to collapse. But there was no one else. Just silence. Cold, sanctioned betrayal. I wasn't just losing a job. I was being erased from a family that pretended I belonged. I leaned back in my chair, hands clasped in my lap, like I had all the time in the world. Inside, something was tearing. A wire snapping slowly inside my chest. They gave me 2 options. Resign quietly, today. Make it clean, Richard said. or be fired within the week, which would complicate things for everyone. The message was clear. Don't make a scene. Don't damage the brand. Don't expect sympathy. If this goes public, he said, well, people talk. He was talking about my reputation, about making sure I couldn't get hired elsewhere, about turning the narrative into one where I was the problem. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood the game. I kept my face neutral. Can I write it myself? The air shifted. Richard blinked. Jonathan finally looked at me. You want to write your own resignation? Richard asked. I do. A beat of silence. That's fine, he said carefully. We just need it by end of day. I stood, calm, my palms flat on the table. You'll have it. I walked out without looking back, no folder in hand, no signature on any line. I didn't slam the door or make a scene. But I wasn't walking away in defeat. Not this time. If I was going to leave, I'd do it on my own terms. And I'd make damn sure they'd regret how they played this. I didn't know it yet, but that one decision, to write it myself, was about to cost them far more than they imagined. I went home that night and opened a blank document. The house was silent. More silent than usual. Not just the kind of quiet that settles in after the kids go to bed, but the sort that creeps into the corners, presses on your chest. My wife had already turned in for the night. I hadn't told her everything. Not yet. I sat in the small office just off the kitchen, the door cracked open. The only light came from the soft glow of my laptop screen. The desk was cluttered with unopened mail, an old mug with dried coffee at the bottom, and a framed photo of our kids from when they were still little enough to call me their hero. The cursor blinked. Midnight passed without fanfare. I wasn't tired, but I wasn't alert either. I just sat there, feeling like the floor had shifted underneath me and I was still waiting to land. There wasn't any anger. Not yet. Just a deep hollowness. 21 years wiped away in a meeting that didn't even last 20 minutes. No handshake, no goodbye, no thank you, just a demand and a deadline. I rubbed my hands together for warmth, then stared at them. These hands had fixed broken printers in the early days, carried boxes, built spreadsheets no one else had the patience for. I'd stood in for sick relatives at company events, answered calls on holidays, stayed late when the younger ones clocked out on the dot. And it came down to this. I thought about just signing whatever they had printed, walking away clean, like Richard had put it, clean meaning quiet. No waves, no resentment aired, just disappear and be remembered, if at all, as someone who didn't fight. That instinct had been trained into me. Be the level-headed one. Don't make it awkward. Keep the family peace. Smile when they cut you out of decisions. Nod when they sideline you. Swallow it whole. It worked for a while, until it didn't. Because that same silence, it's what made me invisible. I was there for everything, and yet, not part of it. Not really. When Jonathan crashed the warehouse software system and blamed a junior staffer, I fixed it, quietly. When the client list got leaked to a competitor and they suspected me, no one even asked for my side of the story. They just appreciated my discretion. And I took it. I kept taking it. I leaned forward, placed my fingers on the keyboard. I didn't know exactly what I was going to write, only that I had to write it, myself. That was important. It had to be mine. A fresh document opened. No headers, no formatting, no template. I stared at the blank screen and breathed. There was a moment, a long one, where I considered typing out a full explanation. Everything I had done for the company, every project I saved, Every moment I carried someone else's burden. I thought about writing a farewell that was gracious but pointed, that hinted at how wrong this all was without coming off bitter. But then I stopped. They didn't care about the story. They wanted closure, and preferably silence. They expected me to write something that checked the boxes, something clean they could file away, show their legal team, and move on from. And that expectation, that was the opportunity. I typed a single sentence. I deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that one too. This went on for a while, adjusting words, checking tone. I wasn't looking for dramatic. I was aiming for surgical. Every word had to do a job. Not just sound right, but mean something layered. Eventually, I landed on it. Just one line. Crisp. Plain. But underneath it, everything was buried. It said exactly what they needed to see. No more, no less. But it also said something they wouldn't realize until it was too late. People skim, executives especially. They read with assumptions. They expect formality, not subtext. But attorneys? They read for blood. I leaned back, read the sentence out loud. It didn't make me feel better. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. What I felt was clear, steady, like I'd found my footing again. They thought fear would make me reckless, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved the file, named it something simple, closed the laptop, no warning, no argument, no final confrontation. They'd get what they wanted, but not the way they expected. They thought resignation meant surrender, but they hadn't read what surrender actually requires. The resignation sat untouched in my outbox for 2 days. On the third day, I sent it. No subject line, no cover note, just the single sentence attachment. Then silence. By the 5th day, life had settled into a rhythm I didn't expect so soon. Breakfast with the kids, checking job boards without really meaning it, running errands to feel useful. That morning, I'd taken the grocery list and told my wife I'd handle it. It wasn't about the milk or the eggs. I just needed to do something normal. I had just finished loading the last bag into the back seat of the car. The kind of mundane moment where your thoughts wander and the sun feels too bright for your mood. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. I stared at it for a second longer than usual. I already knew who it was. I just didn't expect it to come this soon. I answered without rushing. Hello? The voice on the other end was measured, calm, and just rehearsed enough to feel practiced. Mr. Delaney, this is Mark Foster. I'm calling on behalf of Crawford Holdings regarding your recent resignation. There was a pause that wasn't accidental. I was hoping we could ask a few clarifying questions just to make sure everything is clear moving forward. I stayed quiet for a beat, my keys still in one hand, the car door half open behind me. He didn't sound hostile, didn't sound friendly either, just professional, controlled. I opened the driver's door, slid in, and shut it softly behind me. Started the engine but didn't drive, just sat with the AC humming. Go ahead, I said. There was another pause, shorter this time. We reviewed the resignation letter you submitted, and there's just one part we wanted to confirm. Your intent. His tone was polite, but there was a new edge under it now. Subtle. Like someone balancing two versions of a truth and hoping you'd pick the one that made their life easier. I said nothing. He continued, carefully. In particular, your phrasing, effective upon full settlement. Could you explain what you meant by that? There it was. That single phrase. 7 words. It landed. I leaned back in the seat and let the silence hang. I wasn't panicking, Quite the opposite. This wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. They'd skimmed. They assumed. They treated my exit like a box to check. And now someone in their legal department had finally read the sentence and realized what it actually said. I didn't rush my answer. "Mark," I began, steady, "did you read the sentence carefully?" That threw him off just enough. I did. I believe I understand the phrasing, but legal would prefer a direct interpretation from you." That was the crack. They weren't asking because they didn't understand. They were asking because they did. "I don't think there's much interpretation needed," I said. "It's simple. My resignation takes effect once full settlement is reached. Terms, obligations, and entitlements, as outlined by law and internal agreements." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't add anything extra, just enough to tighten the knot. He cleared his throat. "So, in your view, you're not fully resigned?" "In my view," I said, "the sentence speaks for itself." A longer pause now. "We'll need to review this internally." "Of course." I didn't offer anything more. I didn't ask for an update. Just let the quiet fill the space until he thanked me for my time and hung up. I sat there in the car for a moment. Grocery bags warming in the back, kids' music from the last ride still queued up on the stereo, the air starting to feel too cold. It was the first time I felt it. Not victory, not relief, just momentum. The subtle shift that happens when the other side realizes they don't fully understand the rules you're playing by. That was when I knew they hadn't fired me. They'd handed me time. The morning started like most others. Coffee, news, a quiet kitchen before the kids came down. But before the second sip of my brew, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. 3 emails, all marked urgent. All from different department heads. I opened the first one, eyes still adjusting to the screen. It was polite. Too polite. Lots of "appreciate your time" and "just clarifying next steps" language. The subject line read, "Resignation details, follow-up needed." The next email was from HR. No greeting, just a request for a short meeting later that day, phrased as a courtesy conversation. That one ended with, "We want to ensure mutual clarity." Nowhere did it say termination. Nowhere did it call me a former employee. Not even a casual, "we're moving forward." Just hesitation cloaked in courtesy. They were watching their language now. Every word had been weighed. By mid-morning, it wasn't just emails. A former colleague texted me, "Hey, just checking in. Heard things are still in motion?" Still in motion? According to them, I was already out. But the internal story had shifted. Quietly. Strategically. A few hours later, a friend in compliance sent a vague message. "Your name came up in today's ops meeting. They're not sure how to label your file yet. Looks like they're waiting on something." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The narrative inside the company was changing. I was no longer the guy who'd quit. I was the guy in an ongoing process. They weren't calling it resignation anymore. Now it was transition. That's corporate speak for "we're losing control of the story." It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like watching a fog roll in, slowly swallowing the building I used to walk into every morning. Late that morning, the fog reached home. My wife called. "I just got off the phone with your sister," she said, voice low. "She said Nate told her you're refusing to cooperate, that you're trying to cause problems." I took a breath. "She said you're dragging it out to hurt the company, that you've already signed, but you're changing your mind." I didn't interrupt. I let her keep going. She asked me if you were okay, if this was a breakdown or something personal. There it was. It wasn't about documents anymore. It was about painting a version of me people could dismiss. Do you want to tell me what's going on? She asked, because I'm caught in the middle here. And honestly, it's starting to feel like you're not telling me everything. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. But I'm also not rushing into something they've already twisted. Do you really want to fight, though? She asked. Why can't you just let this go? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I did want to let it go, but not on their terms. I could feel the familiar bind closing in. Protect the family. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. But this time, I didn't fold. I didn't lash out either. I'm handling it, I said. That's all I can tell you right now. A long pause, then a quiet, okay. I thanked her for calling, told her I loved her, hung up, then sat in that silence for a long while. Early that afternoon, another email arrived, this time from their legal department. Polished, neutral. We'd like to invite you to a clarifying conversation regarding your resignation and next steps. They weren't saying what they wanted, but it was written between every line. They wanted me to talk, to elaborate, to commit to a version of the story they could shape. But I've worked in that building long enough to know. When legal starts asking simple questions, you're not supposed to answer. You're supposed to walk into the room thinking you're in control and walk out having signed it away. I reread the message once, then responded with a single line. Please direct any further questions through my counsel. That was it. No greeting, no signature, just a mirror. By late afternoon, my inbox had tripled in size. Voicemails, meeting requests, vague notes from old colleagues asking if I was okay. I didn't post anything, didn't reply to anyone but my lawyer, didn't try to set the record straight. I just waited. Because I didn't need to convince them anymore. I just needed to stay consistent. And by lunchtime, it was clear they weren't trying to end this quietly anymore. It started with a phone call, not from legal this time or HR, but from someone I used to trust, David, a senior VP, been there nearly as long as I had. We'd sat across the same tables, shared hotel dinners after conferences, swapped stories about kids over coffee. His name popped up while I was sitting on the porch, trying to focus on the breeze and not the noise. Hey, he said casually, like we were just picking up an old thread. Got a minute? His voice was warm, too warm, the kind that felt practiced. Sure, I replied, flat, guarded. I've been hearing bits and pieces, he said. You know how things can spiral. I didn't answer. I just wanted to reach out, as a friend, off the record. I know it's been tense. Nobody wants this to get messy. There it was, the word, messy, delivered like concern, but loaded like a weapon. You've had a good run, he added, a real legacy here. It'd be a shame if it all went sour. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees, staring at the dead leaves gathering at the edge of the porch. He went on, casually dropping phrases like mutual respect and protecting reputations. I heard the shift, less about helping me, more about managing me. Familiarity as bait, respect as currency. Then he said it. You know how this industry is. People talk. Doors can close quietly. It wasn't a threat, not out loud. But it didn't have to be. I felt the flicker of anger rise in my chest, then forced it back down. I appreciate the call, I said, steady. Good to know we're still on speaking terms. He chuckled, but there was an edge. Of course. Just think about the bigger picture, all right? When the call ended, I didn't move. I let the silence refill the space he'd cracked open. I knew that tone. I'd used that tone once early in my career, back when I thought diplomacy meant bending others gently until they broke themselves. Now I was on the receiving end of it. Less than an hour later, the pressure bled deeper. A text from my wife lit up my screen. Dad wants to talk. He's worried. Said you're putting the family at risk. I didn't respond immediately. I stared at the words, letting them sink in like cold water soaking through my shirt. Another message followed. Please, just talk to him. He's not trying to fight. He's scared. I'm scared too. I sat back, phone in hand, jaw clenched. So it had reached him. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just concern. It was strategy. The office had stopped calling it a professional issue. Now they were calling in the family. For a moment, it worked. I imagined my kids overhearing arguments. Imagined my wife caught in another awkward conversation at school pickup. Her friends whispering about that situation with her husband. The thought made my stomach turn. And for a minute, just one, I considered it. Really considered it. What if I just ended it? What if I called David back, said I'd sign something clean, walk away, let them write whatever story they needed, let the tension die? I went inside, sat back down at the same desk, same screen, same document, opened the file again, stared at the single sentence I'd written, effective upon full settlement. I read it once, twice, then leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Was it worth it? All of this? Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was dragging this out because of pride, or some old wound I didn't even realize was still bleeding. The quiet in the room felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were watching me, waiting. I reached for the mouse, moved the cursor toward the file menu. For the first time, I hovered over delete, but something stopped me. A memory, quick and sharp. I was 30, sitting across from the same man who now wanted me out. He'd made a comment back then, light, offhanded, about how I was a good worker, but not really leadership material. I'd laughed it off, said nothing, and regretted it for years. That moment flickered now like a match in the dark. I dropped my hand from the mouse. No, I wasn't going to delete anything. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing for sure. If I backed down again, if I let them write this ending for me, I'd never stop repeating the pattern. I didn't know how I was going to fight this, but I knew I couldn't erase myself again. I stayed at my desk long after the house went quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you hear things you normally miss. Pipes settling in the walls, the low hum of the fridge, the faint ticking from the kitchen clock. I wasn't looking at anything in particular, just sitting there, staring past the laptop, my mind swimming with everything and nothing. And then my phone buzzed, a message from Mark, no greeting, just 6 words. You didn't hear this from me. My chest tightened. Mark wasn't the kind of guy who sent cryptic messages. We weren't close, but we'd shared enough hallway nods, enough after-meeting glances that I knew when he reached out like this, it wasn't idle. I texted back, "What's going on?" His reply came fast. "Legal's drafting something. Aggressive." My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Another message popped in. "They're aligning the story. Leadership's in on it. You need to be ready." I stood up, fully awake now. Whatever fatigue had been sitting on my shoulders evaporated. I stepped into the hallway and walked quietly past the kids' rooms. The glow of their nightlights cast a soft spill of color across the carpet. I pressed my palm briefly to each of their doors before heading back to the kitchen. Coffee at midnight isn't wise. I made it anyway. This wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't veiled threats or friendly reminders. This was coordinated, official, escalation with a logo. As I waited for the brew to finish, I replayed what Mark said in my mind. Aggressive, story, leadership. They were laying a foundation. One where I wasn't just a disgruntled employee with a carefully worded resignation. No, they were shifting it, reframing my exit, casting doubt on why I left. Maybe even who initiated it. And once that seed is planted, it grows, especially in corporate soil. I sat down again and opened a blank document. This one not for them, for me. First, I listed dates, emails sent, meetings held, conversations that had red flags. I jotted down memories before they faded. Who said what? Who looked away? Who repeated phrases like, "You understand this isn't personal," as if saying it made it true. They were going to try to bury me in confusion. That much was clear. Discredit me, and the sentence in my resignation would lose its weight. Make me look unstable or reactionary, and suddenly, effective upon full settlement, starts to sound like noise. It wasn't about winning the argument. It was about making sure I couldn't even start one. I took a breath and scrolled back up my notes. They weren't just trying to erase the sentence. They were trying to erase me. I clicked save. It was just past 1 a.m. I leaned back and looked around the room. Everything was still. But something inside me had shifted. Earlier in the evening, I was cracking. Now, I was calculating. I padded down the hallway and peeked in on the kids again. One of them had kicked the blanket off. I covered her back up, pulled the door mostly closed. I walked past the framed photo in the hallway. Me, my wife, the kids, all smiles from 3 years ago. I caught my own reflection in the glass. Same face, different man. Downstairs, I sat at the kitchen table and picked up my phone. No texts, no calls, but I knew it was coming. This wasn't just about this week. This had roots. If I let them pull this off, I wouldn't be the first, and I sure wouldn't be the last. I poured a second cup of coffee and went back to my laptop. This time, I created folders, email backups, screenshots, time-stamped logs, everything with quiet precision. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. I wasn't responding anymore. I was preparing. And with each click, each line added to the file, something in my spine straightened. I wasn't hoping for fairness now. I was preparing for fallout. Around 4 a.m., I rubbed my eyes and stared into the screen again. No hero music. No grand epiphany. Just the calm before something I could no longer ignore. This was going to get uglier before it got better. By the time the sun pushed a pale line across the bottom of the blinds, I was still sitting there, notes organized, timeline built, inbox archived. No fear left, no anger even. Just readiness. By morning, I wasn't waiting to see what they'd do. I was ready for it. I'd barely taken a sip of my coffee when the phone rang again. Not a work number, not a name I was expecting. The screen lit up with something far more complicated. Carl, dad-in-law. I let it ring twice, 3 times. A voice in my head told me not to answer, that whatever was coming wasn't a conversation, it was a setup. But something else, older and deeper, reached out and tapped the green button. "Hey, Carl." No small talk. "We need to talk. In person. Just that. No explanation, no warmth, and no option to say no." I told him I'd meet him at the diner off 9th, the one he liked, quiet, familiar, away from anything that looked like a courtroom. It gave the illusion of neutral ground, but I already knew better. He was already seated when I walked in, a half-drunk cup of coffee in front of him, stirring it like it needed convincing. I slid into the booth across from him. "Appreciate you coming," he said, finally looking up. I nodded, not speaking. He didn't waste time. "This thing, it's gone far enough. You've made your point." I looked at him evenly. Didn't realize I was making one. He smiled, tight and practiced. "Come on. You and I both know what this is really about. But here's the thing. It's getting messy. And not just for the company, for the family, for your wife, for the kids." I didn't flinch, but I felt it, like a hand reaching in and twisting something beneath the ribs. "I'm listening," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "You've had a good run. People respect you. But what's happening now, it's reckless. You're dragging this into places it doesn't need to go. You think this fight is clean? It never is. And if it stains you, it stains all of us." There it was. No legalese, no HR language. Just pressure dressed up as patriarchal concern. "Look," he continued, "this can still stay in the family. Quiet. Resolved like adults. No lawyers, no headlines, no broken pieces. You back off. Pull the letter. Say it was a misunderstanding. They'll package a quiet exit, you get your severance, and life moves on." I blinked, slow and deliberate. "So the truth gets cleaned up too?" He didn't answer that directly, just looked at me like I was being difficult on purpose. "This isn't about truth," he said finally. "It's about peace." I sat back, let the silence fill the space between us. "I know you think you're standing on principle," he said, softening his voice. "But you've got responsibilities. A wife who's barely sleeping. Kids who don't understand why their dad is pacing the house at night. You think they won't feel the weight of this? Guilt, not sharp, not shouted, just steady, like a leak under the floorboards. You're not just risking your job," he added. "You're risking their stability, their future, your marriage. And for what? One sentence?" I looked down at the table, then back up. "I didn't start this, Carl." He nodded. "But you can finish it, with dignity, and no one has to get hurt." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Terms. No formal admission from either side. Just clean lines. Quiet exit. It's more than fair." I stared at it. I already knew the price tag wasn't the point. The point was silence, control, finality. "I assume if I sign, I agree the letter meant nothing," I said quietly. "It meant what it needed to mean then," he replied. "But now it means risk. For everyone." I didn't pick up the paper. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "No." He didn't react at first. Then he leaned back, arms crossing, the posture shifting. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not pretending it didn't happen." He studied me for a moment. Then, for the first time, his tone lost its edge of civility. "You think this is about some principle, but it's pride. You don't want to look like you backed down." I shook my head. "I just won't lie." The silence stretched longer than before. I stood. "Tell them what you want, but I'm not rewriting the truth." He didn't move. As I turned to leave, his voice came low and cold behind me. "You're forcing our hand." I paused, just for a second. Then I kept walking. Back at home, the house was quiet. My wife was in the kitchen, arms crossed, face unreadable. We didn't speak. Not right away. She'd heard, or been told. Probably both. I could feel the question in her silence. Why are you doing this? But the question I was living in was, how could I not? This wasn't about burning bridges. This was about refusing to be buried under them. The phone buzzed again an hour later. A new number. No voicemail. They were closing ranks. I could feel it. If they were going to destroy my credibility, I realized, they'd have to do it fast. They didn't wait. By late afternoon, my phone was vibrating every few minutes. Texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. A couple of missed calls from numbers I recognized but didn't answer. When I finally opened my email, I understood why. An internal memo had gone out. Not to me, of course, but it didn't take long before someone forwarded it. No commentary, just the document, dropped into my inbox like a weight. It was written in that careful corporate voice that pretends to say nothing while implying everything. My departure, it claimed, was performance-related. There were phrases about ongoing concerns and standards not being met. No specifics, no dates, just enough smoke to suggest there had been fire all along. I felt a brief flash of heat move through my chest. Not rage, something sharper. Then it settled. This wasn't confusion. This was reputational warfare. They weren't trying to convince me anymore. They were racing to define me before I could define myself. My phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Another email arrived before the vibration stopped. This one wasn't internal. This one had letterhead, a formal notice from their legal team. Dense, aggressive, designed to overwhelm. They claimed my resignation letter had been misinterpreted. They suggested my wording was ambiguous and potentially misleading. There were veiled references to my conduct and my intent, carefully phrased to plant doubt without making a direct accusation. It was a flood. And floods have one purpose: to wash away footing. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed the laptop and stood up, walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, let the cold hit my hands. My breathing slowed. This wasn't what I'd planned for. My original strategy assumed caution. That they'd tread carefully, worry about exposure, try to keep things contained. I'd thought patience would be my leverage. But they weren't being careful anymore. They were being loud. I went back to my desk and opened the folder I'd been building since the night before. Timelines, emails, notes, everything I'd documented while it was still fresh. I read through it again, slower this time. That's when I saw the gap. Waiting them out wouldn't work. Not now. Every hour of silence let their version harden. I felt the edge of fear again, but it didn't take over. Something else stepped in front of it. Clarity. I needed to move. Differently. I called my attorney. When he answered, I didn't vent. I didn't speculate. They've escalated, I said. Publicly. There was a pause on the line as he processed that. Send me everything, he replied, and don't respond to them directly. Not one word. We worked quietly for the next hour. Drafts went back and forth, shortened, stripped of emotion, reduced to facts and definitions. When we were done, the response was almost disappointingly brief. One paragraph. No accusations, no counterclaims, just a statement. My resignation was conditional. Conditions require fulfillment. Words mean what they say. We attached the documentation, the timeline, the correspondence, a clear pattern of consistency. Then we sent it and waited. The silence that followed was different from before. Not empty. Taut. Hours passed. The sky outside shifted toward evening. I ate something without tasting it, checked my phone, then set it face down. Finally, a reply came, shorter than their first letter. The language noticeably softer. Phrases like reviewing internally and seeking alignment. No mention of misconduct, no performance language. Careful again. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I could feel it. Not victory. Not yet. Resistance. The ground under them wasn't solid anymore. This wasn't about winning loudly. It never had been. It was about ending it cleanly, with the truth intact. And in that quiet moment, I understood something else too. The next call would decide everything. I barely slept. The house was quiet, too quiet, but not peaceful, just still. That kind of stillness that follows days of noise and storm, where everything looks unchanged but nothing feels the same. At 9:13 a.m., the phone rang. I saw the caller ID, recognized the area code. I let it ring twice before answering, standing at the window with the morning sun pouring across the kitchen counter. "Mr. Connolly," the voice began, measured, neutral, not cold, not friendly. Company counsel, no throat clearing, no small talk, just the sound of a man doing a job, now with no more room to bluff. "We've reviewed the communication trail, and after internal consultation, we're prepared to move toward a formal resolution." He paused. I didn't say anything. No legal threats. No blame. The tone had changed completely. They weren't negotiating anymore. They were tying off a problem before it could bleed out further. He continued, outlining the offer: full severance, mutual non-disparagement, a press statement drafted with careful ambiguity, long-standing contributor, mutual parting, continued respect, clean and vague, just how corporations like it. What was missing? Apology, ownership, anything resembling accountability. But I didn't flinch. I didn't ask for it either. I wasn't after redemption. I was after closure. "I'd like that in writing," I said. "Of course." We ended the call without ceremony. I stood there, phone still in my hand, staring out across the backyard. The world hadn't changed, but something inside me had. I sat down at my desk and read their summary twice. Then I forwarded it to my attorney, added one sentence: "Please confirm all terms match our documentation." That was it. I leaned back and exhaled. The resolution was formal, final, but I knew the cost hadn't just been theirs. They gave up control. They paid to keep it quiet. They accepted terms that undermined their original posture. That would sting, for them. But for me, I lost something I hadn't yet figured out how to name. Not pride. That had burned away weeks ago. Trust. Alignment. Illusions. Things I didn't even realize I'd still been holding on to, even as I fought. There's no celebration in moments like these. No flags waving. No music playing. Just the absence of further harm. Later that afternoon, I got a follow-up call. A different lawyer this time, maybe more junior. Polite. Efficient. "We just need to confirm your intent. Do you still stand by your original letter?" I didn't hesitate. "Exactly what I put in writing," I said. No elaboration. There was a pause, not long, but full. "Understood," she replied. That was the last step. They had tried every path to redefine the narrative, but in the end, they came back to the words I'd written from the beginning. I didn't revise. I didn't rephrase. I didn't need to. The same sentence they tried to bury now stood unchallenged, and once that was done, things got quiet again. Emails slowed. Messages stopped. No headlines, no lawsuits. Just a slow fade into the background. But peace doesn't return the way you hope. It doesn't sweep back in and make you feel whole. It just sits beside you like an old acquaintance. Still, familiar, tired. The kids still asked questions I couldn't fully answer. My wife kept her distance, not hostile, not warm, just measured. We were all adjusting. I didn't try to explain everything to everyone. I didn't go around justifying myself. Some relatives stopped calling. A couple friends pulled away. Others, quietly, stayed close. I didn't chase any of them. Instead, I focused on my children. They'd watched more than I wanted them to, heard more than they should have, but they also saw something I hadn't realized I was showing them. You don't fight because you like conflict. You fight because dignity isn't given, it's kept. I didn't walk away celebrated, but I walked away intact, and that was enough.